It all started with small things, little changes in Kate's behavior that, at first, I brushed off. She had always been attentive and present in our relationship, but after a few months of training with Martin, something shifted. She began acting distant, almost cold at times. She stopped making plans with me after her workouts, claiming she was too tired or had other things to do. At first, I didn't think much of it. She was busy, life happens. But then she started coming home later and later, always with some vague excuse about needing to run errands after the gym. I remember how her phone, once casually tossed on the coffee table or left charging in the kitchen, suddenly became glued to her side. It was always on Do Not Disturb, face down, as if she didn't want me to see her notifications. My gut started sending warning signals, but I ignored them. I told myself I was overthinking things, that she was just going through a phase, or maybe she was stressed. I even rationalized that her time with Martin was a good thing. She was getting healthier, right? And Martin was just her trainer, nothing more. But deep down, I knew something was off. There were nights when I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was happening behind my back. I tried talking to her, asking if everything was okay, but she dismissed my concerns, saying I was being paranoid. It worked at first. I'd back off, feeling guilty for doubting her. Little did I know, I was giving her all the space she needed to continue lying to me. Then came the moment I couldn't deny anymore. One night, after she got home late from another long workout, she left her phone on the counter and jumped in the shower. I remember the room was quiet, and out of nowhere, her phone lit up. I glanced over, and there it was, a message from Martin. It wasn't innocent. The preview alone told me everything I needed to know, and my heart sank. My hand started shaking as I picked up the phone, reading the full message. It was graphic, intimate, and far beyond anything a personal trainer should be sending to his client. I stood there, staring at the screen, my stomach in knots. My mind raced, but it was like everything froze around me. I was blindsided and furious, but at the same time, it all made sense. Everything I'd been pushing aside, all the little signs I ignored, it was all right there, in front of me. When she got out of the shower, I confronted her immediately. I held up her phone, showing her the texts. She froze, her eyes wide, like a deer caught in headlights. For a second, I thought she'd try to lie her way out of it, but instead, she just started crying. She admitted it right away. She had been cheating with Martin for months. She had the audacity to tell me she couldn't help it, that she had fallen in love with him, as if that was supposed to make it okay. I remember feeling a mixture of rage and heartbreak, like my world had been shattered in a single instant. I asked her why, how she could do this to me after everything we'd been through. She had no real answers, just a lot of tears and pathetic excuses. The betrayal hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd always thought I'd be the kind of guy who could see something like this coming, but I had been completely blindsided. And yet, looking back, it was so obvious. All the late nights, the distant behavior, the phone glued to her hand, it all pointed to this, and I had ignored it. I guess part of me didn't want to believe it, but in the end, I couldn't escape the truth. In that moment, I felt utterly broken. My trust, my relationship, the future I thought we had, all of it was gone. It was just another ordinary day, or at least it was supposed to be. I was sitting on the couch, mindlessly scrolling through my phone, when a number I didn't recognize popped up on the screen. I almost ignored it. Unknown numbers usually meant spam calls or some bill collector, and I wasn't in the mood for either. But something made me pause. There was something strangely familiar about it, and I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I should check. I opened the message and froze. It was Kate. After all these months of silence, there she was, reaching out to me from a new number. My heart dropped. The wound she'd left had barely started to heal, and just seeing her name on the screen felt like someone had ripped the bandage off. I didn't know whether to be angry, hurt, or just numb. Part of me wanted to delete the message, block the number, and pretend I'd never seen it. But curiosity got the better of me. Against my better judgment, I opened the message and read it. It started off with her saying she missed me. She said she'd been thinking about me for months and was sorry for everything. Sorry? After what she did, sorry felt like a joke. But as I kept reading, the tone shifted. She sounded desperate, almost broken. She admitted that leaving me for Martin was the biggest mistake of her life. That's when I felt it, a flicker of something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Was it pity? Anger? Nostalgia? Maybe it was all of those things swirling together, but it stirred something in me, something I wasn't ready to face. She went on to explain that her perfect relationship with Martin had crashed and burned. Apparently, the guy she'd thrown everything away for turned out to be no better than she was. He'd been cheating on her, too, with some other woman. The irony hit me hard. The same man she'd left me for had betrayed her in the exact way she betrayed me. It should have made me feel satisfied, vindicated even, but it didn't. All it did was stir up more confusion. As I read her words, I felt a mix of emotions I wasn't prepared for. Part of me wanted to laugh at the sheer absurdity of it all, while another part of me was angry that she thought she could just waltz back into my life after destroying everything. But then there was the other part of me, the part that still remembered the good times. The part that still, despite everything, had some feelings for her buried deep inside. She said she was miserable and lonely, that she realized now what she had with me was real. That line hit me the hardest. I wanted to believe her, to believe that she regretted her decisions, but I couldn't help wondering if she was just saying this because Martin had tossed her aside. Was she coming back because she actually missed me, or because she didn't have anywhere else to go? That doubt lingered in my mind as I reread her words. Her voice was the same when we talked on the phone, soft, apologetic, almost pleading. She told me she'd been too ashamed to contact me sooner. She said she had been thinking about me for months, but she didn't have the courage to reach out. There was desperation in her voice that made me uncomfortable, like she was looking for a lifeline, and somehow I had become her best option. I could hear it in the way her voice cracked as she apologized again and again, but I wasn't sure if she was truly sorry for what she did or if she just regretted the fallout. I sat there, listening, torn between wanting to hang up and wanting to keep listening, as if some part of me still craved an explanation. I had spent the past years trying to move on, trying to forget about her, and now here she was, dragging all those feelings back to the surface. Part of me wanted closure, wanted to hear her admit her mistakes so I could finally put this behind me, but another part of me felt like a complete fool for even entertaining the idea of talking to her again. As she spoke, I could feel the weight of all the unresolved emotions pressing down on me. I was angry at her, yes, but there was also this nagging feeling of sympathy. She sounded so lost, so broken, and despite everything she'd done, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity for her. Maybe that's what made me stay on the line, even though I knew I shouldn't. By the end of the conversation, I was a mess of conflicting feelings. I didn't know whether to forgive her or cut her off for good. The anger, the pity, the memories of what we used to have, they all blurred together, leaving me more confused than I had been before she called. I hung up the phone, staring at the screen, wondering if I was an idiot for even considering giving her the time of day. Meeting up with Kate for coffee felt like stepping into a room where all the air had been sucked out. The tension between us was almost suffocating as we sat down at the small cafe table. She looked different, not in the way someone changes physically, but there was something in her expression, a heaviness in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. I wasn't sure what to expect from her, and it seemed like she didn't know where to start either. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity before she finally spoke. The conversation started awkwardly. We exchanged a few pleasantries, but it was clear neither of us cared about the small talk. There was too much unsaid between us, and it was weighing heavily on both of us. Finally, she took a deep breath and began apologizing. Her voice was soft, almost trembling, as she admitted that leaving me for Martin had been a huge mistake. She said it was the worst decision she'd ever made and that she'd been paying for it ever since. I listened in silence, trying to keep my emotions in check, but I could feel the anger bubbling beneath the surface. She went on to explain what happened with Martin. At first, everything had been great, or so she thought. He gave her attention, made her feel special, things she claimed she hadn't felt in our relationship for a long time. But soon enough, the cracks started to show. He wasn't the man she thought he was, and before long, she found out he'd been cheating on her. The guy she had left me for had turned out to be just as unfaithful, and now she was left alone, betrayed, and miserable. Hearing all of this stirred something in me, but it wasn't the satisfaction I thought I'd feel. Sure, there was a part of me that wanted to laugh at the irony, but mostly, I just felt a strange mix of pity and anger. Pity that she had been so blind, and anger that I was even sitting here listening to her after everything she'd done. Then she shifted the conversation, and things took a turn I wasn't expecting. She started talking about our relationship, about us. She said that while she knew cheating was wrong, she didn't feel like I'd been the best boyfriend. According to her, I had been emotionally distant, more focused on my work and hobbies than on her. She said there were times when she felt invisible, unappreciated, like she didn't matter to me. She admitted she should have communicated her feelings, but instead, that resentment had built up over time. She claimed that's what made her vulnerable to Martin's attention, that he filled the emotional void I had left. Her words hit me like a gut punch. I didn't expect her to turn the blame on me, at least not like this. Part of me wanted to lash out, to tell her that nothing I did justified her betrayal, but another part of me paused. Was she right? Had I been emotionally distant? Had I neglected her without even realizing it? I hated that she was making me question myself, but at the same time, I couldn't ignore the gnawing doubt creeping in. I had always thought of myself as a good partner, someone who was present, reliable. But as she talked, I couldn't help but replay moments in my head, times when maybe I had been too focused on work or wrapped up in my own world. Maybe I had missed the signs that she needed more from me. I didn't want to admit it, but there was a sliver of truth in what she was saying. Still, that didn't excuse what she'd done. Cheating was a choice she made, and no amount of emotional distance from me could justify that. I tried to explain my side of things, how I thought I had been there for her, how I had no idea she felt neglected. But she just nodded, saying she didn't blame me entirely, it was more about her not communicating her feelings. She said she knew she should have talked to me, but instead, she ran to Martin, thinking he was the solution. Clearly, he wasn't. After what felt like hours of this back and forth, Kate finally came to the real reason she wanted to meet up. She asked if we could try again. She claimed she had learned from her mistakes and was willing to take things slow, to prove that she had changed. She said she still loved me and that what we had was real, something worth fighting for. I sat there, staring into my coffee, feeling more confused than ever. A part of me wanted to get up and leave, to tell her that she had already destroyed everything we had and that I could never trust her again. But another part of me hesitated. Hearing her admit her mistakes, hearing her acknowledge that she'd been wrong and that she had reflected on our relationship, it stirred something in me. Maybe it was hope, maybe it was just the remnants of old feelings, but I couldn't shake the thought that maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild. Or maybe I was just a fool for even considering it. By the time we parted ways, I still didn't have any answers. I was torn between wanting to leave her in the past and wondering if we had both grown enough to make things work. The betrayal still loomed large in my mind, but so did the memories of the good times. Could I really forgive her? Could I even trust her again? I had no idea. All I knew was that I wasn't as sure about anything as I had been before that conversation.